Self is the self-education your future self will thank you for. Thank you for being here. If you are coming to just check out the podcast and see what you think of it, if you've gone through and listened to the past episodes, thank you for your patience. I do a lot of rambling, but hopefully I get to the point, and the point usually being something that you can take from my own experience and then apply to your own life. I hope that this is something that encourages you to do something that later on in life you can look back on and go, you know what, that kind of helped me. Because a lot of what I'm expressing here through my own discovery and exploration of my identities is that there's a lot of stuff that we should know that we just don't. And maybe it's just me. I might be the one person who feels this way. But after going through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, I feel as if my experiences in life did teach me a lot of what maybe I missed in school or what I feel like I should have learned. For instance, things about finances and budgeting and learning about just paying bills. You need to make and negotiate for enough of a salary in order to support yourself. I didn't know anything about time management even. I mean, yeah, for classes, you got to be there at this time, but there's a lot of leniency. There's not really any repercussions. There's also a lot of aspects of just dealing with people. I learned about emotional intelligence, and that's something that I feel would have been invaluable to have as someone going through middle school, high school, navigating just like the various emotional states of people that are going through puberty. But at the same time, I guess we get the information that we need when we need it most, because there's plenty of times where I could have used a little bit of emotional intelligence. But one of the main things that came up for me this week that I would like to be able to not process, but hopefully just use as a learning experience was first something that came up in therapy for me, and it was that my therapist pointed out that what I attract, who I attract a very specific type of woman, and as I described to him the types, he or the people, let me rephrase that, like the interactions that I've had, he was like, you realize these are all the same person. And when he said that, I couldn't unsee it, which was wild to me. I'm not going to go into like too many details. I'm not going to go into details at all, actually, just out of respect for anyone who might hear this. But it made me realize that the type of person that I am is I'm someone who has very malleable boundaries. I sort of mold my boundaries according to what the other person shows me their boundaries are or what is okay. People will only do or continue to do to you what you allow them to do to you, what you allow to be done to you, right? And in my experience of dating, I can't say I've ever had just solid, fixed, structural boundaries. And I can also say the same thing in my careers. I can say the same thing with my family and the same thing with my friends and any passions that I've had, even in playing sports. There have never been solidified structural boundaries in place for me. So what came up in therapy for me was how I tend to do this thing where something that is actually a deal breaker makes its way through my filter, and later on I get even more reactive to something that may seem unrelated to that thing but ultimately ties back to the original point. And I can use a couple of examples that I've had in the past here, one of which being I don't want to be in a relationship with or date someone who exclusively comes off as being interested because we both have herpes. That is something that I have really been against because I don't give herpes near enough of like a quality energy investment of my worth and my value. But for someone to look at me and see that and go, oh, here's an attractive, eligible man who also has herpes. Let me start talking to him. I don't want that for myself. And I have never pursued people just off of that. I mean, damn, if I'm thinking about it, I don't think I've ever really pursued anyone. Not that I'm saying this out loud, but even then, it's just been, there have been instances where that kind of organically on the surface seemed to happen. But then after some things surface that you just can't unsee or unnotice, you start to question things, and then when you start to question stuff, you get answers. And I've been very good about just asking people now, like, hey, is this, I'm thinking this, is it true? And then getting an answer that allows for me to choose how I want to respond to it moving forward. Another example will be, someone's in a relationship to some extent. Like, I will find a way to rationalize the boundaries that I have for people in a way that their behavior doesn't violate my boundaries and I should leave them alone. Transparency is one of my boundaries. Transparency and consistency are probably the two most important. I can't say that. All four of them are really important. That's consistency, transparency, maturity, reciprocity. These are all important to me. And anyone who does not give me all four of those things is not someone who I can feel safe emotionally processing with, right? So because of that, I can't really have true intimacy, like the depth of real intimacy, if those boundaries are violated, if they're not upheld. There can be the illusion of intimacy because I'm molding my boundaries around a person's existing behaviors. And I will just, if someone tells me, a whole good example is when someone tells me that they're non-monogamous, and then, you later find out that their partner doesn't know that they're non-monogamous. I could rationalize in my head, well, she told me she's non-monogamous, so this is okay. And you can just see how that plays out with just even a little bit of denial or avoidance, even going back to if someone's dating me exclusively because I have herpes and so do they. I don't want to be someone's choice out of convenience, because then it's not even really a choice. Now, if we're mutually engaging in something that is convenient, that's one thing. But even if it's convenient, I value the depth of the possibility of connection. And as I explore for myself what connection looks like, I'm finding that there are many ways to connect. There are many ways to do so. And there's also ways to disconnect. And one of those ways being to uphold my own boundaries in a way that, if anything, people are going to mold their behaviors to my boundaries. And I think that when that happens, it's more okay because, again, boundaries are just letting people know, hey, here's how you can respect me at the very least. So if someone wants to share space with me, it's important that they honor those four pillars of my boundaries. These are the four things that I need in order to feel safe to connect with somebody: reciprocity, maturity, consistency, transparency. And not all the time do I get that. And again, it just goes back to trying to mold these values around the behavior of a person. So I can say, oh, well, maybe that person lied to me, or they didn't tell all of the truth because they were afraid of how I'd react. That's rationalizing lack of transparency. Oh, well, she's young. She just doesn't know any better. That's a sign of immaturity. oh, well, I'm sure she's busy and that's why, texts are short or whatever. That's lack of consistency. And then to be asked, how are you? And then explain it and then like not hear from them for a while, or they say they kind of make it about them. That's a lack of reciprocity. But you can rationalize that as, oh, well, they got a lot going on right now. We all have a lot going on right now. I can't think of anyone who's ever just had nothing going on, at least not in my range of perspective or my close circles. So there's always going to be something that we can rationalize for someone's behavior, but we shouldn't have to rationalize a shift in our boundaries unless it's something that serves us, unless it's something that just needs to be adjusted in a way. Because let's say I feel like mine are very fixed. I can connect with you if I have the four values that are important to me. So if I'm not receiving one of those, does that mean I can't connect? Maybe. But it would make me a little bit hesitant to connect at any sort of genuine depth out of fear of just, I know that when people sneak into the cracks later on, I'll find out, and it's something really, really small that ties into whatever value wasn't upheld, whatever boundary wasn't upheld by the other person. And then that's when I lose it. That's when I flip it, or that's when I flip. And that's when a breakup happens, or I quit a job, or I just decide to stop talking to someone, or I don't engage or initiate any sort of contact, and I become distant. So knowing these boundaries and being able to keep them fixed and structured until it serves me to adjust is not only going to allow me to more so connect with the people that I'm supposed to connect with, but disengage and disconnect from the people who I'm not supposed to be connected with. And looking at my own history with boundaries, I just haven't had any. So going from not having had any boundaries at all, being boundaryless, to suddenly figuring out, okay, there's something here for me to discover and play with. I need to have boundaries. And then being able to implement them is one thing, or identifying them is one thing, implementing them is another. And then what do you do when someone challenges your boundaries? Do you let them in more? Do you push them away? Do you keep them where they are? What do you do? I think a good example in my own experience has been navigating rejection. I think that me adapting my boundaries to the person's behavior has been one way to defend myself against rejection. Because if I have hard-nosed, hard walkaways, then maybe I'm going to find myself interacting with people who have hard nose and hard walkaways just off me being who I am. And it feels bad to not be accepted. And it feels bad to be able to say, oh man, I was rejected. So I've shot my shot several times. I've been flirty several times. And very recently, I was presented with someone asserting their boundaries on me or to me. And this hasn't happened, at least not in this way before for me. It was very different because I've always thought that I've been like a very innocent, flirty kind of person, because I definitely don't like pull the trigger unless I absolutely know. I mean, even then, I think that it's had to be initiated with me several times if someone was interested. Like I would need for there to be the most blatant, obvious signs because I'm so oblivious, and maybe even that's a defense mechanism against rejection. But yeah, I thought that I was like cheering someone up. They had just kind of gone through a breakup, and I usually flirt. And I guess this time it was just bad timing because she was just like, hey, this made me uncomfortable. I wasn't able to say anything right then and there, but yeah, this is how it made me feel. And I would appreciate if moving forward we could have this type of relationship. And I was just like, all right. Didn't know that that's what I was doing. And even then, like, I guess that if you only allow for someone to, if you allow certain behaviors, and the behavior is going to continue, and maybe people are going to push their buttons. So perhaps this was just a day where I was pushing buttons, but I received that, I heard it, I thanked her for feeling safe to tell me that, rather than like sending a screenshot on social media of whatever, of what I said that would have made her decide that this was the last straw, and then being like, Courtney's an a-hole, because I would have been like, dang, why didn't you just tell me? I would have stopped. So being on the other end of receiving boundaries, I feel like is much more easy than giving them, but they're the same thing. It's two sides of the same coin. Being able to assert your boundaries, and then being able to respect boundaries and honor boundaries, and receive it in a way that's like not defensive. It's like, okay, well, here's how you interpreted my behavior. I'm not going to defend myself or anything, because I said what I said, and you heard what you heard based on what it was that I said. So I can't challenge your how you've received something that I've said or something that I've done, because I'm not you. I'm not in your body. I don't have your experiences. So maybe this looks like something that you've experienced before. These are all things that you really have to take into consideration when someone is asserting their boundaries or upholding their boundaries, and you happen to be someone who got in the way, if you happen to be someone who violated it. So I really appreciate and feel safe that this person was comfortable enough to tell me that, and also that they will have pointed something out to me that maybe I was completely oblivious to. So yeah, it's made me examine that in my behavior with people. I know that we're in a world now where a lot of communication is done via text, text messaging or messaging, DMing, and you lose a lot of context. So you don't know if, I mean, all you really have is like the time of the message, the wording, the spelling, any sort of slang, emojis. Like, that's our nonverbal communication now, really, until we're back out in the world. So perhaps like playfulness and sarcasm and just different emotion that can be behind words that are said, that art is, for the most part, not relevant unless you're able to be in front of someone, or unless you're engaging with someone like directly, where you can see facial cues and body language and things like that. So being able to uphold your boundaries is, I guess we could say, just as important as being able to receive someone else's boundaries. And I think that two people or more who have boundaries that are respected have a lot of intimacy among one another. And it's not the other way around. People sometimes look at those who have boundaries as being jerks or being a-holes or stuck up, stubborn, selfish. That is not the case. People who have boundaries have had to have gone through enough of something to have decided, hey, this is not something I'm going to tolerate anymore. I'm not going to allow myself to be treated this way. People who are around me, I'm not going to enable poor behavior that makes me feel disconnected, not only from them, but also disconnected from yourself. Because what it is what I found, let me speak from my experience, is that I know a boundary has been violated because I feel a little sense of disconnection from a person. And that disconnection can be perhaps avoidance. It can be perhaps a little bit of distancing, less interaction, if you look at it externally. But on the inside, I could be having thoughts of what if, overthinking, self-sabotage, all of these thought processes and feelings come up based on my own beliefs of what it means to have not had my boundary upheld. And I didn't have language for this before. So what this could look like is feeling some type of way after being rejected, or after being told, hey, I don't like that you did this thing. Can you not do that anymore? Moving forward, let's be friends this way. That could make me feel, oh my God, well, what did I do wrong? I need to fix this. But now that I understand it as, people really just standing up for themselves, I can receive that a lot better than I could have even 3 or 4 years ago. Boundaries are a new word to me, and being able to honor and respect boundaries looks a lot different than how it looked for me to treat people before I came across this word and understood what it looked like in practice from other people. And even doing it myself, like, it's challenging. It is really hard because you want to connect with people, even if that sense of connection comes from just physical contact, from a back and forth text exchange, or if you're video chatting or sending memes to one another. Like, these are all substitutes, I guess, for connection if your boundaries aren't really upheld. So it's almost like it's an illusion. You can, again, just rationalize how a person fits into your life and how they're navigating through and around your boundaries. You can be like, oh yeah, they belong here. When in reality, perhaps there's this repression of, or suppression of, the real feelings about what this person is doing. Now, if you're getting what it is that you need from a person, and they're getting what it is that they need from you, and it's consented to, and you both know, and you both talk about it or whatever, or even if it's unspoken, then I guess that's cool. But then it's just going to take for a little bit of a shift from either direction to really rock the boat. If two people are in a boundaryless, let's say, compadre situation, or friend with benefits, then it can look like someone being like, whoa, we had a good thing. Why you want to mess it up by now giving me boundaries? Like, what do you mean? We have never done these things before. Now you want to start doing this? And it causes friction in my experience. So that friction is not something that should be uncomfortable. It should be something that's welcome, because that friction lets me know that you care. That friction lets you know that I care. And when we can use our words to discuss through the process of the discomfort, I think that it even allows for a greater connection of intimacy, because even with that, there comes vulnerability. Vulnerability through, if you look at it from my lens, transparency, and the maturity that it takes to be able to communicate at that level, right? So, yeah, I'm really understanding that even how I look at rejection is a little bit different. A rejection is simply, I can't honor and respect your boundaries, or even the other way. Like, I feel like you can't. And it's not a challenge at all. It's, two or more people who just understand that based on their belief systems and behaviors and their consistency between the two, they recognize that, hey, we just aren't a fit for each other, at least in this capacity, but here's how we can be. And then that's when you go on to co-create your relationship, but still be aware of what your boundaries are. And if you're someone who doesn't know boundaries, if you are 50 years old and you just now discovering this word and you're like, what is that? What are boundaries? How do I do that? It's never too late to start. Ever. It is never too late to start to explore what your boundaries are and what your deal breakers are. And speaking back to deal breakers, I think I called them something else earlier in the episode, like your walkaways or something like that. I've learned that I don't have any straight up deal breakers for myself. I have been in relationships, I've been in conversations and situationships that I should have clearly walked away from early. And again, it just, you rationalize it maybe out of loneliness, maybe out of disconnection, and just wanting to feel connected to by another person, and wanting that intimacy from another person, another human body, that you're so willing to overlook those invisible aspects of your identity and what they need in order to be expressed, i.e., boundaries, you're so willing to overlook those things and succumb to the needs of the body, or succumb to the needs of, your emotions, like the emotional, like right now, like I need this right now, regardless of what the long-term pain or suffering is going to come as a result. So when we have boundaries, it's even a good way of protecting ourselves from that immediate pain. But there's going to be pain from just the hunger of connection, right? Because your boundaries may keep a lot of people away, but the right people are going to come in, and you're going to be nourished in a completely different way when you have and uphold boundaries, and someone comes in and they see your boundaries and they respect your boundaries. So throughout the process of even figuring out what those look like, I mean, you can look at people who do have boundaries. Look at celebrities, right? How challenging is it? You can't just DM a celebrity and get a hold of them at all. You got to go through their people, their people, their teams around them. Those are their boundaries. Those are physical, living boundaries of celebrities. People who may not necessarily be at celebrity status. Let's look at, some more accessible people like podcasters or social media influencers. Their DMs are off limits for certain topics. If you want to reach out to them, they may ask you, hey, look at my boundaries. Here's a whole highlight I did. If you DM me, please don't send me pictures of yourself, or don't ask me anything. Don't make comments about my body. These are all different boundaries that can be had by someone at that level. And in everyday life, a simple boundary can just look like, hey, I'd appreciate if you not raise your voice at me when we're in person. Or, hey, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't show up late when we have plans to be at a place that we had reservations for. Like, I understand it's maybe in your nature to be late, but not mine. And if there's a plan for us to be somewhere at a certain time, I'm either going to have you show up. I'm going to have to tell you a different time so that you get there maybe on time or a little bit earlier, or you can just respect, that I would appreciate if you come and show up to the venue earlier. So there's all types of ways of demonstrating that. I don't want to make this an episode of like introductions to boundaries, but it's really a matter of like looking at the extremes. What's an extreme hell yeah? What's an extreme hell no or deal breaker? Extreme hell yeah for me has to now look like those boundaries that I have, the communication boundaries. If I'm going to connect with you, whether it be mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, I have to have all four of those. I need reciprocity, maturity, consistency, transparency. That is how I feel connected to. I give those to myself. I'm connected to myself. In order for me to connect with other people, I have to hold them to those standards. That's what my boundaries are for moving forward. And then as far as deal breakers, why this is so challenging for me is because I've been on the other side of rejection, and deal breakers feel like rejection. I haven't talked about this really, but there was a time where I had an online date, and we were gonna meet up at my gym. We made the plan, and then I had a podcast recording. So I messaged the lady and I said, hey, I just looked up and I have a podcast recording that's probably an hour into when we would be around each other. So how about we just reschedule so that we can have a little bit more time together. I let her know that generally I'm free between like 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. before I have to be back at the gym. And so we planned to just meet up the next day. And the plan was to meet up to meet up after her call at noon. I want to say it was after her call at noon, right? So noon rolls around and I get a text. She's on her way. Okay, so we're already late. And when she gets here, I look outside and she was still on the phone. She was about 20 minutes late. I would say about 20 minutes late. And then when she got there, she was on the phone. Hold on. Okay. somebody's outside yelling. I don't know what that was about, but it was really distracting. So anyway, I look outside and she was on the phone, and she eventually gets off and comes in. I give her a hug. It's like, oh, hey. She asked for the Wi-Fi password because she had one more call. She let me know this ahead of time, that she had a 5-minute Zoom call. Where in life do you need to be on Wi-Fi on your computer for a 5-minute Zoom call? I don't know. But at this point, I was just like, oh, okay, well, here you go. You can do that. Gave her the Wi-Fi password. She hooks up she connects to it and everything. I go into the other. I was sitting here at first and like just kind of hanging out, and I was like, this is weird because it's been 5 minutes. So I get up and I go into the other room, and I'm sitting there, I'm chilling, and I was like, okay, this is definitely taking longer than 5 minutes. Maybe she's about to steal my stuff. So I come back into the little room she was in. I just gave her a little smile. I grabbed my laptop and my wallet and everything, and I came back out. And I was just like watching YouTube. I look up and it was about 45 minutes, 55 minutes later. And I come out, or she comes out, and she's like, hey, you ready to eat? I looked up at the clock. It's like, bruh, it's been a whole hour and a half. I was like, no, I got to go. And she was like, well, I thought you had until 4. I was like, people start showing up. Like, I am scheduled to be here at 4. People who show up a little bit earlier. There are things in between the day that I also have to do. I probably should have made that clear. But when I said between 10 or 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock, that did not mean that this entire window of time was up for me to just be jerked around, really. And then when we were leaving, it was a little bit awkward. I just asked her, I was like, hey, do you want to try this again? And she said, yeah. Like, her voice got real high pitched and she looked away. I was like, are you sure? And she did it again. So that to me was like, that was a little bit of an inconsistency. Maybe this was a nervous tick. I don't know. But the way that I interpreted that was there was something in between her beliefs and her behavior that wasn't matching up. So I was like, all right, I'm going to let you go because this doesn't seem right. Something's real sketchy about this. So she leaves and then calls me later and was like, I don't understand. I was like, well, I had the decency to just let you know, hey, I have a thing that would be dead smack in the middle of our hangout and then reschedule because I didn't know how long it would have taken. So I didn't want to make plans with you after already having had plans in place. So why couldn't you have reciprocated and shown me the same level of respect by just saying, hey, how about we do a different time when I don't have anything scheduled? So she understood and she was like, man, this is a bummer. This sucks. I liked you. But that was an example of me upholding my boundary, at least around reciprocity. Right. So I think we all have examples of that or something like it. It's just so much harder to look on the successes of it than it is to immediately come across the failures of it. Because like, how many people have I told, hey, I'm non-monogamous, and then they just stop messaging me? Or how many women have I told I have herpes, and then that turns out to be a deal breaker for them? But how many times has someone made it through what I know to be a deal breaker for myself, but I've been like, oh, you know what? Well, maybe this time it'll be different. No, it's not been different ever. Unless, when you realize it, you can address it with the person and let them know, like, hey, this is something that's important to me, and I just now realized it, but when people are late, it bothers me. Or when people don't reciprocate, it bothers me, right? So now that I have this experience to draw from, I'm more able to articulate it myself. But we really got to challenge our own beliefs with our behaviors. And we also have to have our own experiences with whatever it is that we're exploring. Because this whole exploration stuff and discovery stuff, it's safe when it's just you, when it's journaling, when it's talking out loud to yourself, when it's processing, or when it's just thinking. But to implement it and put it out there with another person in real time and possibly have feedback, or possibly have feedback that you don't like, that's a game changer. That's different right there. It hits a little bit different, all right? So I'm really struggling with identifying what my deal breakers are, other than time, other than reciprocity. I guess if we flip my values, anything that directly is opposite of transparency. So if someone's a liar, I should walk away. If someone is inconsistent, I should walk away. If someone's immature, and when I say immature, like there's a difference between playful and flirty and immature. Like to me, immature would be the example that I gave you earlier. If the woman that I was having an exchange with, who didn't like that I was flirting with her, had she gone to social media and screenshotted and been like, men are a-holes, look at this, then that would have been immature behavior. And then not having reciprocation. If I'm good about communicating, or I'm trying to stay in touch, and it's very one-sided communication, then it's not reciprocal. And in those instances, I think a person can really feel used. So feeling used can be another one of my deal breakers. This is really cool to be able to safely sit here and talk through what it is that I'm experiencing, and by the end of the recording be like, oh, okay, question answered or problem solved. Because I don't think I've had something like this before, where I've felt comfortable processing, and it's been a long time coming for me, because I have a bunch of journals, and it's like once you finish journaling, yeah, you can't unsee it, but what do you do? What do you do different? How do you implement that? How do you hold yourself accountable for journaling? It's always been like a spontaneous thing for me. Whereas recording on this podcast, I hit play or hit record on the mic, and I start talking, and bam, stuff comes up. And I'm going to always have something to talk about in my personal experience that hopefully looking back on, like I can laugh about and be like, oh, I was a different person then. Here we go again. I don't know what's happening outside. Oh, man. He's just walking with a boombox and the speaker on. Please don't stop it for in here. There's a bus stop outside the gym. I pray he's not waiting on the bus. Okay, it's fading away. God, what time is it? It's 7 o'clock. I'm so glad that nobody showed up for yoga class today, because during this time I'd be teaching a yoga class. We'd just now be heading into Shavasana-ish. No, probably about 10 minutes from now. But still. I also teach yoga, by the way. I don't think that ever came up. But anyway, so this was a really good exercise for me to find my deal breakers, and also my go-aheads. When your boundaries in place are upheld by another person, I think that that's a good opportunity to go ahead. And, that's a good time to shoot your shot and face the potential of a rejection. Because in the event that your boundaries are upheld by the other person, then they're your people, right? To some capacity. So you're connected to. Now you can introduce things that perhaps you may not have wanted to share, or you feel like maybe you'd be rejected for. And that's a good place to do that. That's a good time to do that, when a person's demonstrated that they respect your boundaries. Because more often than not, I think that person's going to receive whatever it is that you have to say in a way that, as long as it doesn't conflict with their boundaries, you'll be fine. And I got to tell you, like, being rejected is probably one of the things that I avoid the most in life, but it feels good after having gone through it in the most recent situation, because it lets me know that as I talk through it, and I talk about how it makes me feel, or if I talk to anybody else about the experience of rejection, like, I can speak to that. I can be like, well, I was also rejected in this way, right? And it's really just a redirection. If a person is going to offer you a rejection, right, then you have to look at it like you're the kind of person that they feel they can be honest with. And that to me upholds transparency flat out. And if I was really looking at it, like now looking back, reciprocity, had that been a firm boundary, wasn't there. So if the flirting is one-sided, and then you look up and it's like, oh, well, damn, where'd this being friend zoned come from, or where'd this become not okay? It was probably not okay a long time ago based on the value of reciprocity. Because if I'm flirting and you ain't flirting back, or if it's like not matched really, then that's really something to explore and look at. And I overlooked that. So it's all good. Like, looking at your boundaries, upholding them is going to not only keep people safe from your wrath, or you be safe from their wrath, but it kind of shuts things down immediately. Like, you know what's okay, you know what's not okay, you know how to communicate with one another. So yeah, this felt good. This felt real good. Did I say the thing that I wanted to say, or no? Yeah, I did. That's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. If you want to support the podcast, you can leave a review. You can also email me, Courtney@selfpod.com. Oh my God, I don't remember it. Courtney@selfpodcast.com. Oh man, the website is selfpodcast. So yeah, Courtney@selfpodcast.com. But yeah, I really wish that looking back, I would have had how to deal with hearing no, how to say no as part of my education. It wasn't. This was something that I had to learn. How to identify when your behavior makes someone uncomfortable, the emotional intelligence piece. These are all really important things that I wish I would have had sooner, because maybe they would have shifted the dynamic of how I interacted with people a long time ago. And maybe I'd have dealt with my herpes diagnosis a long time ago. Maybe I would have dealt with, I better have been the founder of a nonprofit that at this point would be able to get anyone therapy because of the necessary steps and opportunities that I had in place. But I also can't dwell on the past or look at what shoulda, woulda, coulda happened. Here I am. I got the information now, and it's a matter of what are we going to do with it? That concludes this episode of the self-education. Hopefully your future self will look back and thank you for receiving, or for having for yourself. I don't know. I'm going to keep playing around with that. But anyway, thank you. Bye.